Welcome back, everyone. So let's get straight on with the rest of our programme for today. We'll now hear from our second Thought Leader Perspective session, this time discussing how to create and monetise engaging sports content. George is joined today by Grabyo CEO Gareth Capon and David Candler, Veritone Senior Director of Customer Solutions. So over to you, George.
Thanks, Heather. So this Thought Leader Perspectives panel, we're going to explore the various stages of the life cycle of sports content, from creation, with the aim of engaging and interacting with viewers, to AI-enabled, personalised and customised content, to the use of archive, with a focus on additional revenue generation. So in short, how do you make more content and how do you make more of your content? Thank you both very much for joining us. So Gareth, we're going to start with you. Grabyo's tagline, create anywhere, distribute everywhere. So just by way of a brief introduction, can you give us an idea of what you're providing at the moment and who you're providing that for as well?
Sure, thanks, George. Grabyo is a cloud production platform for video. There's two sides to the business, a live production and streaming platform, which is really rebuilding all of the components of a traditional TV gallery or broadcast truck in the cloud as a SaaS subscription service. And then an on-demand part of the business, which is live clipping, editing, and distribution, primarily social video, a business that Grabyo is probably better known for and has been known for over the last 7 or 8 years. We work with, in sport at least, right through the line, so federations, teams, leagues, broadcasters, OTT, even some athletes. So a real range, and really focused on live and near-live distribution of content.
Perfect, very neatly done. And Veritone, obviously, AI solutions. Can you tell us what that means for those working in the field of sports and in particular with regard to live sport production as well?
Well, basically, as you said, Veritone, an enterprise AI company. We've worked with sports for many, many years in Tier 1, Tier 2, all across the world, in North America and Europe. Basically, on the creation side, we have multiple applications. At the heart of everything, there's an entire operating system for AI, the brain in the jar, if you like. And then on top of that, multiple applications from asset management to help the creative process by aggregating everything together in one place and finding it. We have our whole archive licensing division to help you tell the story, whether you're making a documentary, an advertisement, or whether you're a network. And then something we'll look at later, Veritone Voice or voice cloning, and Chat GPT. And then in monetization, again, back to licensing, but we also do data analytics on brands. So we do attribution. So during a sports event, we can basically follow a sponsor, follow the ads, and look at web uplift during the event and all of that kind of stuff. All of these things driven by AI.
Thank you. So yeah, it's useful to know where you're both coming from and your angles for the discussion. So some quite distinct areas and separation, but there's a bit of overlap as well, isn't there? Can you give us an idea of how the two companies might work together?
Well, I think what's really important to us in the age of cloud and web services is for us to really focus on what we do and stay in our swim lane, if you like. So we find natural synergies with technical partners. And basically, what Grabyo do in respect of one thing they do where they can grab live content, edit it, and push it to social media and digital endpoints. One of our short-form digital licensing platform, SportX, is a natural digital endpoint for Grabyo. So if you're using Grabyo, you can also get a return on investment by basically publishing it to one of our licensing outlets, and then make the money on there. You can also publish as archive into our cloud-based digital media hub. But then equally, if you're telling a story from Grabyo and you want to dip into the archive and pull it into your story, then we can do that as well. So we just found it a natural partnership that we could play with. And I think I've covered lots there. You might have some additions there.
I think you've covered most of it, David. I think the key point is that from a content owner's perspective, you look to monetize your investment in content or distribution, wherever that may be. If you're looking for, from a social video perspective, that might be reach and engagement. I know driving tune-in, there might be sponsorship opportunities. There may be direct advertising opportunities there as well. But things like SportX and other forms of publishing or rights distribution for short-form content is an obvious point of intersection. I think there'll be more with regards to AI that we'll talk about in time, but as we move forward.
Now, synthetic voice cloning is one of the things that Veritone provides. You're going to tell us a little bit more about that, but before you do that, we've just got a very short video that I think will help to illustrate the point.
I mean, George Graham assembled a young, hungry team, brought a lot of lads through from the youth ranks, Tony Adams, Paul Merson, David Rocastle.
United States and Wales battle it out in the air for the ball. Weah shoots. It's a goal! United States has won the first point in the game after a shot by T. Weah. 35 minutes and 35 seconds in, and the score is 1-0.
So that's a voice that will be familiar to players of FIFA and viewers of the Premier League on Sky. Can you tell us exactly what's going on there, and also what's taking place there, and why that's going to be potentially useful and helpful to those who are working in production?
Yeah, so we're moving into the world of generative AI here. What we do with voice cloning, we do ethical voice cloning. What I mean by that is anti-deepfake. The person that we're cloning, we have to have the rights to clone, and they own the IP. So, but it enables you potentially as a commentator to be in 5 places at the same time. But we can also produce the language in multiple foreign languages as well to expand your footprint. We do speech-to-speech cloning. We do text-to-speech cloning. We do stock voices. We do custom voices. This was really important because, again, talking about partnerships, we created a partnership with Stats Perform. And the Stats Perform have created a service called Opta Voice, and this is what we're talking about. So we could effectively clone any commentator or any personality with their permission, and so you can have a personalised view of your sport. So what's actually happening is the play-by-play data is coming from Opta data, and within 3 seconds or sub 3 seconds, we're creating the voice output. So we basically ran this across every single World Cup game. Basically during the last World Cup, and automatically provided play-by-play commentary for every single event. So what you just heard there was a particular game. But as I say, this is just one application. There's the San Jose Sharks announcer, Randy Hahn. He basically is busy doing his commentary, but we've also enabled him to do sponsorship reads and advertising reads as well at the same time. So he's got, instead of this being a threat, he's trebled his revenue, basically. So lots of different use cases, but that was a good example that we did.
And Gareth, can you see where this might fit in to the kinds of services and tools that you provide?
Yeah, I think so. As this moves into sort of live and real-time processing and analysis of the data, I mean, we already provide a remote commentary service, so we have people in remote locations, on a laptop doing sports commentary and for productions in multiple languages. You're obviously seeing a lot of demand for that with OTT now, as people want to localize the presentation of that sport to a local audience. And instead of having to fly people physically to a studio now, you don't need to do that. You can do that from anywhere in the cloud. The next obvious extension of that will be, well, what about if you did that in multiple voices or with commentators or more languages? So I think as the accuracy of the, particularly speech-to-speech translation gets better, and the localization gets more widespread, then there are a huge amount of opportunities to do that with the right level of licensing. Right now, probably I'd say that the processing it would be too slow in most cases for us to be able to do that live, but the technology will clearly improve.
And there's clearly a need, all organisations, broadcasters, production firms, to be creating more content. What are the tools that are really enabling that and helping beyond just some of the examples we've just seen?
There's been lots of discussion around AI machine learning sport for a long time, and everything from Hawkeye and VAR and sort of presentation of data on the screen. These are all using sort of computer vision tools. Automated sports highlights has been a big theme in sport for a long time. Again, probably mostly driven by data rather than necessarily by AI machine learning tools. That's maybe beginning to change. But I think that the broader picture is that there is a much greater demand for content on more platforms to more people. The distribution opportunities are somewhat infinite, but the content budgets are not. There isn't an infinite amount of money to support the dynamics of the programming, the quality of the storytelling, and the amount of platforms and people that you need to talk to. So I think that where you can drive workflow efficiency, where you can start to use these tools to create more content, make it more specific to the audience that you're talking to, the better. That said, there is particularly interestingly, in the opposition to that, it probably increases the value of live sport, of live productions, because it's not easy or even possible to create that with an AI. You probably could create a Man City Liverpool game entirely created by the AI, but is anyone really going to watch something which they know is entirely algorithmically generated? So I think that balance is quite important, but where there's going to be work, particularly workflow efficiencies and localization, as sport and distribution becomes more global on the internet, then the demand for this is going to increase significantly.
And the create side of things is obviously a core part of what you guys do. Which particular types of content are you seeing biggest demand for? Is that around the kind of ancillary or live production of the events themselves? Where do you see the biggest growth?
I think the growth of live is definitely where we're seeing the biggest demand in our platform right now, and that is a mix of full match production in the cloud, as well as ancillary sort of shoulder programming. A lot of that might be targeting different platforms, different formats. A vertical video live format on TikTok is not something that was even being discussed in the industry 2 years ago, and is now a significant part of demand for many sports properties. So that is definitely an area where having tools which are more distributed, much lower cost, more flexible in their deployment are really important. But if you actually look at consumption of sport across the board, and particularly different demographic groups, there is a big shift. There's a lot of demand for highlights, for behind the scenes content, athletes driven content. There's a much greater range of demand on this variety of platforms than there was a few years ago. But there is still this sort of inherent serendipity around live, and that's where we're certainly seeing the biggest growth.
And what's happening at the consumption end of things to really kind of drive and shape what you're being asked to do?
Consumers want content everywhere. They don't just want to be in front of a TV. They don't just want to be on Facebook or on TikTok or on YouTube or an OTT service. They are going to move seamlessly between all of these platforms. And as our sort of digitally native consumer base grows up, then that's going to become the expectation for everyone. So I think that's the biggest change. You cannot have a one-size-fits-all solution for sport on any platform anymore. If you're going to reach all of the consumers that you want to reach, you're going to have to make sure that your content is available in all these places, because there is not going to be a single platform which is going to provide all of those solutions and have all of that access to those people.
Yeah. David?
No, I agree. I mean, there is no one-size-fits-all, as you said. I'm just trying to think of some of the major tournaments that we do and some of the content that we're asked to produce and distribute during the event. So basically, for example, we work with the Masters, and we work with, we've just finished Augusta. And when we're there, we're actually invited into the media compound, and we're invited to capture live content. This is where people like Grabyo come in, and we work with, but also taking the world feed. And that we're dictated, please give us, melts, highlights, stuff for press, et cetera, and then we've got, outside of that, this goes into our, central asset management solution, and then we've got about 3,000 global recipients. A lot of them are broadcasters who need bits from not only this event, but from the past, because we bring the archive with us to tell a story. So as I said, it could be press, it could be sponsors, it could be teams, it could be anybody. But it's generally the story of the event, before, during, and after, and what's happened in the past. So, but personally, I mean, I was just saying to Greg, I'm taking my kids down to Bath for the last home game, Bath versus Saracens. That's the live. It's all about the live for me. But my 7-year-old son would much rather just take the highlights and get on with his life. So we're not going to dictate the future. It's a bit of a mishmash.
But I think that point about sort of behind the scenes and access is really important. And the FIBA presentation earlier, so that actually extol the virtues of being inside the locker room, getting access to the players, telling these inside stories. That wasn't something that was being talked about so much a few years ago, and there is a greater expectation of it because there is more direct access to those stories. And actually, that's the hook that sort of drives all of this is creative storytelling. How can we create much better stories for more people at a price that ultimately generates an economic return, for the federation, for the broadcasters, for the OTT providers, but improves the quality of access and the quality of stories for the consumers and the fans, because in the end that's what matters the most. If we're going to have people watching sport, we've got to tell great stories.
So we've heard about some of the changes or some of those trends, if you like, at the consumption end of things. Excuse me. And you mentioned about the issue of revenue as well. So what about some of the changes to the business models as well, and how are they affecting what you're being asked to provide?
I mean, we obviously sit upstream of the distribution, so we can provide tools for live streaming, for content, for short form content on all of the various platforms, downstream of a broadcast or a team that we're working with. The models, tend to be in three buckets. You've got a sort of sponsorship engagement, bucket of content where it's not necessarily a direct revenue return, but you want as many eyeballs on that content as possible. So using things like athletes to help distribute that content, or providing access for third parties is valuable. I think then then you've got the traditional rights model, which everyone in here well understands. That is clearly changing a lot. There are new players in the market. There are new types of rights being created. There are more global rights even being picked up by platforms. If you look at Apple MLS, for example, a different type of rights relationship. And then you get into the whether you have a direct or a third-party distribution model for subscription or transactional services. So it's going to be really messy over the course of the next few years. But you are going to see where I think there's going to be an interesting dynamic is what is that relationship between free and paid. I think that's the thing that we think about a lot. If you're a tier one sport, it's probably very easy, or relatively easy, because there's a huge amount of demand and the value is very high. But everything below that, I've got to think carefully about what is the right distribution model for my content? What's the balance between access and audience and revenue? And is there an opportunity to go to a YouTube and do an ad share deal that may be as valuable as a linear TV deal in the future? Does that happen? Quite possibly in time, and certainly the global access that you get becomes an interesting part of that discussion. So I think this is going to be one of the most challenging times in the industry. If you're thinking from a rights holder perspective, where do I make my bets? Am I going to take a guaranteed revenue stream now? But as technology starts to change very quickly, it's important to make sure you've got a level of flexibility, because we're seeing this market has changed as fast as it's ever changed from a technology perspective.
And what role can or will AI play in some of those changes, do you think, David?
Well, I mean, basically, AI is going to be all over the place, from object recognition within and data analysis within the game. It affects VR and AR exactly. NLP and NLG is used all the time. We've seen some of that with the commentary, etc., etc. What we're talking about is we said is generate guaranteed revenue from broadcast sports right as they sit now. But basically, as the audience becomes more digital and they want more content, that's not going to be enough for federations. They're going to want to explore a bigger marketplace, etc., etc., and they're going to need to embrace technology to create more stories for the fans to basically fulfill what they require. So it's really exciting times. Challenges for certain traditional models, but it's an explosion and it's really exciting. But AI, the more data we create, AI has to be a part of it, because it's beyond human capabilities to manage it.
And there's also a performance element about this. We're talking a lot about consumption and consumers, but if you look at the models of elite performance in sport, the computer vision and tracking and data analysis models that are going to merge out of the AI tools are going to be incredibly important in that space. You're going to do so much more as a coach or a performance analyst within a sports organization. If you can get every data point of every player, you can analyze them across leagues, potentially across regions. That is something that was really challenging to do before, but you're going to get insights from an AI tool that you wouldn't necessarily have even looked at yourself as a performance analyst.
And what about archive as well? What role can that play around these monetization conversations?
Well, basically, I mean, it's telling a story. So we do two types of archive monetization, or licensing, if you like. One is tier one. We represent people like the Masters, Roland Garros, USTA. And so if you any Nike advert, with Serena Williams, it's likely to come through us in the States. That's added revenue for the federation. So it's really when the live rights are finished and it becomes archive, we jump on it and we work on it there. But more recently, we've done the same. We were talking about out of the venue, pressers, news access, behind the scenes. We've created a digital short form platform called SportX, which manages that as well. And again, that's another example of how we can offer federations further chances of monetizing their content, which isn't really involved in the rights piece, which is outside of the rights piece. And that's where Grabyo is helping us.
Yeah, I think one final thing to add is that we've talked a lot about full automation, but I think as a business, our focus is on storytelling, and that generally involves people. How do we provide the tools to make the quality of the content better? You know, how do you add more cameras and replay and better graphics to a tier 2 or tier 3 sports production because you can do it in the cloud and reduce your cost by 75%? How do you take the output of an automated highlight system and allow an editor to tell the specific stories that they want to tell around it, how to change some of the content, make it fit for purpose? So I think it's, for us, our view on how AI becomes a part of Grabyo's future is that it is part of the outcome, but it's not dictating the outcome, certainly not in the short term.
Yeah. Fantastic. Thank you. Packed full of insights. So thank you very much for taking the time to share all of that with us. Thank you very much, Gareth. Thank you, David.
Thank you.